Oh, hello. I am Alper Markov, and today we will be featuring an interview with the author of the Legends book, Jay Annelli. And without further ado, let's get to the interview.
Well, good to see you. So, I guess the first question for Jay, you're Jay, aren't you?
Yes, I am Jay Annelli. Known, you might know me from the Vorthos Cast podcast, the book that I just put out last month,
Which we will
uh,
be talking about.
and from continuity editing work with Wizards of the Coast.
Continuity editing work. Now, I have to ask about that. What is that?
So that is me being a giant nerd. Uh, Essentially, what it is it's being an editor on stories that have happened over the last few years. I give input on, in some cases, characterization. In terms of, oh, this doesn't actually work because we established something else in the past. I will give some recommendations as to whether or not I think a story is working or isn't working, or which parts are great and which parts need some work. Uh, Things along those lines.
What would be an example of something that you feel like got changed that wasn't working? Can you give us an idea of like what that might be?
Uh, that one's kind of tough because I'm a contractor,
Right,
so
right,
I make recommendations,
right.
and I don't typically like calling out what I said or didn't say about something
I hear
because
you.
it can give people the wrong impressions.
Hmm.
Um, what I will say about that in general is it can be amazing the difference between like a first draft and a second draft.
Right.
Like we've seen, so especially with some of the like the Zendikar stories moving back to web fiction, there were like a couple of the stories in there I wasn't too hot on. They weren't bad, but I wasn't too much of a fan of in the first draft. But when it came back in the second draft after editing, it's amazing how much even small differences or small changes made a huge difference in some of the stories.
So, like a small tweak to the story made you like the entire thing. You saw the entire thing in a new light.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So it can be, that's the other thing is, on the one hand, I don't want to take credit for a writer's excellent work that I happen to make a suggestion or two on. And I also don't want to imply something negative by mentioning that I didn't think that would work, and it stayed
Oh,
in anyway.
I mean,
Both things have happened over the last few years, so
right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't, and I don't mean to put you in a difficult place. And I feel like it is a group effort, really, right? The writing. I mean, it's because
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
something that is not, I mean, there's not a person that is the head writer on the show. So like a show would be, right? It's a group of people that contribute, and it's sort of like I mean, really, it's more like a dialogue that creates the story, correct?
Yeah. And there's a lot of phases to it because it's based on a card game. Now, I don't have inner knowledge of everything that goes on there, and I couldn't talk about it anyway. But
Mhm.
there's development that goes on while the card sets are being developed. There's development like way early on, pie in the sky. We know we want to do, for instance, let's say Ikoria. We know we want to do a giant monster world. Well, the world building team has to flesh that out. What does that actually mean? Well, before there's actually any kind of story, things might change as cards develop. The rather infamous example of that is New Phyrexia. The Praetors did not exist when the book that went alongside Scars of Mirrodin was developed. So these
Right.
five major super important characters to New Phyrexia just were not mentioned at all. Yeah,
That's interesting.
the villains in the book were Glissa and Geth, I believe.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, yeah, like oh, that poor Glissa. Ugh, brutal.
yeah, so it can a lot can change over the course of time, and there's a lot of factors that go into things more so than just a writer putting things out.
So, how did you get picked to be the like the person who gathered these stories together for the Legends book?
So for the Legends book, I had been working with the art director, Daniel Ketchum at Wizards of the Coast. And he had worked on the first one of these books. But as things changed, they realized they needed someone external to be able to work on the bulk of the writing and things for this book, because it wasn't something they really had the bandwidth to do another one internally. So they asked me if I'd be interested, and I said, yeah, I'd love to.
And so then how did you become somebody that they went to? How did you even, I guess, get involved with Wizards of the Coast in the first place? What was the evolution of that?
So the evolution of that was I had been writing about magic lore for a while, for almost 5 years now, or actually more than 5 years now. I've been writing articles trying to make it more accessible. So I started with a series on MTG Salvation called Archive Trap, along with my friend Kaburi. I moved on to Cool Stuff Inc. a few years ago and have been publishing those on their website for the last few years. I had been putting out the Vorthos Cast podcast, and there was a big internal transition for the story back in 2018-ish, where the franchise team was taking over from the what's now known as the world building team, and they needed someone who was pretty deeply involved with all the minutia of all the stories, because they had a big story coming up with 36 different planeswalkers, as well as a bunch of other characters that they wanted to make sure actually lined up appropriately with stories that came before.
Okay, cool. So I get then when you were choosing the characters that were in the book for the legendary creatures, was there any sort of like process to that, or was it random? I mean, what were the reasons that these creatures were chosen?
So they knew they wanted the book to be based around Legends. It was going to be coming out this year. It was the year of Commander. They knew Commander Legends was coming out this year. When I started this book, I didn't know Commander Legends was coming out this year. This is more of like it's not a part of Commander Legends, but it's part of like the year of Commander. When we first started, I asked for a list of, the legendary creatures that their side definitely wanted included in the book, that are characters that are going to either be important in the future, have been important in the past, or are important for the brand. For instance, Avacyn. You're never going to make a book about legendary creatures that doesn't include like Avacyn or Nymph Mizzet, because
she got the star treatment there. It's like you see her in the center, you're like, oh, there she is. She's the star.
They're like the big tentpole legendary creatures for planes. As for the rest of them, what we had discussed going into it was we wanted to see a lot of the diversity of Magic's legendary creatures over the years. So both in terms of creature types, which is why there are some lesser known creatures in there that we don't have a lot of, like ogre legends, for instance.
No.
So finding one that fit appropriately and was also popular was important. That also includes humans. So like you'll notice Sisay is up front on the cover there.
Oh yeah.
Sisay's up front because she's a awesome black woman who the story kind of gave short shrift to.
Wait,
in the 90s.
Captain Sisay is Captain Sisay is black?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Huh. Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So she kind of got sidelined by the whole Gerard white male savior story back in the 90s, where he is the chosen one. It becomes weird because they rescue her and then he's kind of in charge for the rest of the time, and it just felt very weird. So I thought it was important to give her a front and center role here, but also in terms of a lot of the legendary humans you'll see, we wanted to have a diverse array of people that were included.
That's interesting. I never knew that. I mean, I guess she was so fair-skinned, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I can't talk much about the art direction back in the 90s for that particular choice.
Yeah.
But she is from Jamura. She's from Jamura. I believe she's from Zhalfir. which is a predominantly Black region of Dominaria. It's like the African analog. There is diversity there. There are people of are analogs of other real world cultures,
Right.
but it's predominantly an African analog.
Yeah, I mean, it's that should be understandable to people. I mean, I always wonder about people who get up in arms about like the reality of things. There's going to be regions and there's going to be diversity. You have to have diversity because people are diverse. Just relax.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we were looking at while we were picking human characters. I didn't want a bunch of white guys. And the last thing we talked about were legends that are popular in Commander, because we wanted this to be the kind of book that a Commander fan could pick up and learn more about legends or other commanders they're likely to see across the table from themselves.
Yes.
So I looked on places like EDH Rec and a few other places to see like who are the top commanders in different colors, and or basically to be able to justify some of my more obscure choices. I said, well, his card is like number 4 played red card or something like that. So that was another factor that went in there.
Now, I'd heard you speaking about the actual, like the lore, the stuff that's considered canon. Now, you were not allowed to do any changes to that, correct?
No, I wasn't allowed. I was allowed to synthesize things. So, for instance, the Kineos and Tiro section synthesizes 2 different stories, or origin stories for Meletis on Theros. The original story we got was that Ifara handed humanity the power to defeat the Archon tyrant who had ruled the city before them. And then the commander blurb for Kineos and Tiro talked about how they were the first kings of Meletis because they led a rebellion against the Archon tyrant, whose name, I think it's Agnamakos or something like that, whose name otherwise escapes me at the moment. So those are 2 different stories that I was allowed to put together for them.
Can I ask about Edgar Markov? What I found interesting about what you wrote about Edgar, and that I didn't see before, was that it sort of previously he was sort of painted as this alchemist who was just looking for a way not to die, and that there wasn't anything nefarious about it. And then what you wrote is that he would have people believe that, but apparently that's not true.
Yeah, so Edgar is an interesting character. For those of you who don't know, it's Soren Markov's grandfather. He's the one who created vampirism on Innistrad. The challenge with Innistrad's lore is the original Innistrad, much like Theros Beyond Death, did not have an actual story. And it was actually a full year of no actual stories, with the exception of, I think, the Cursed Blade, which is was kind of the beginning of the web stories way back in the early 2010s. There are a couple different origin stories in there, but Edgar Markov, back in the day, the story went that he was influenced by a demon named Shilgengar. There was a famine in the region, and so Shilgengar pushed him to conduct this ritual that would kind of end the problems of the famine, but the end solution was creating vampires that would then feed on the people, so that, you know, part of the population was no longer eating real food, they were eating the people, and then there was more actual food for the people, and it's kind of troublesome. Yeah,
it's tricky. So Edgar's maybe not as nice as or at least not as altruistic as we thought he was.
No, Edgar Markov is not altruistic. No, he is the Dracula of Innistrad. He is the archetypical vampire.
I know, I hate to ask, but I have to since I have you here. Is he alive? Can you say that? I know you can't.
I can't. I don't know. I can't talk either way because I don't know. But what I will say is, and what I have said all along, is we never see a body. So all of the text says that he is presumed dead. So if you pull out the Innistrad art book, it says he's presumed dead.
Yes.
Markov Manor looks kind of jacked up.
It
So
certainly.
I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to see. There is an Innistrad block around the corner. So
Yeah.
or pair of Innistrad sets. I still use block. Sorry.
I mean, if there's no Edgar Markov, I'm just gonna cut off my own head and eat it. If I can't not have my Edgar. So
How would
I
you
have,
eat it if you cut it off, though?
well, I would have somebody there to feed parts of it to me while
Oh,
I'm
okay,
still.
that's a little much.
Yeah.
All
Well, I mean, I'm being a little dramatic, but
Yeah, fair enough.
I love me some Edgar, and it's just that I saw that and I was like, ooh, this is interesting. Who do you think your favorite character of all the legendaries is in the book?
It's Krenko, 100%. I love my little goblin mob boss. I gave him a shout out in the back of the book. One of my original drafts for it had it from the point of view of a Krenko apologist, where it used allegedly in front of everything and talked about how he was a pillar of the community. But I think it was for the kind of product it is. That was it was a little too silly for. And it stood out in the midst of the other more factual little bios.
Right, it was more of like an in joke that was maybe too in depth for people who are just kind of coming to this new.
Yeah, I did get him on the cover though, so
Yeah,
that's
did.
him with luminaries like Sisay and Gerard and Niv Mizzet and Avacyn, and then there's Krenko there with his little shiv.
I know Krenko with a Traxa. Who would have thought that could have ever been?
Yeah, I was very proud of that cover. I was Tyler J did an amazing job, but it just came out so much better than I could have expected.
Were you involved with the suggestions for that too as well?
Yes, I helped develop the art brief for it. It wasn't
awesome.
just me. So Daniel Ketchum also had input. The editor at Abrams Comic Arts, Eric Klopfer, he also had input into it, and then we kind of synthesized, met in the middle between all our different opinions. I think each of us got a character we love on that cover and sent it off. The Abrams folks sent it off to Tyler.
That's really cool. I mean, I like the inclusivity of it. I've heard you on your podcast talking about how you like had to sort of you're explaining to people that this is something that for a casual Magic fan to pick up, but and not maybe necessarily something for people who are lore experts. But I still find it like good stuff. I mean, I don't understand any pushback that you could be getting. I mean, I think some people have bad taste, but whatever.
Well, thank you, but no, if you are deeply into Magic lore, I think the idea is that you're probably not going to learn too much new from it. Where it's aimed doesn't mean other people won't enjoy it, but it is aimed at kind of a newer or casual fan that is maybe not as heavily invested or heavily as enfranchised in the lore.
You write an interesting article on Cool Stuff Inc. about gatekeeping and Magic, and how some people can be adverse to letting people into the story, or some people don't like the fact that there is other intellectual properties brought into the game. And you make a point that I think is valid, is that they've been bringing in other intellectual properties since the very beginning. And is that something that you have a hard time with having to be pro stance on that? Because I know there's a lot of clapback going on.
Well, I think there's a big difference between being cool with outside properties as a concept and the way for instance, this all came from the Walking Dead
right
Secret Lair, the way that was executed in particular. I think with a lot of these controversies in terms of like Magic products, people have a lot of different feelings that all get bundled up in the same way. So, people who are not fans of the mechanically unique cards might have had stronger feelings about a Walking Dead flavor with mechanically unique than they might have otherwise, or for something that a more fantasy aligned property like if you play Commander, like I see Legend of Zelda elf tokens all the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
I see all these different properties that are on the table that people like put together with their own on their own time, or they have their own altars that do this kind of thing, or they have decks that are already thematic in different ways to different franchises. I think if it happens again, and I'm not involved in any of that, I think
He's not involved, everybody. Not involved.
I want to be very, very clear. This is on my own personal opinion.
He is innocent.
I think it's the kind of thing that probably should have started off a little smaller. Like, you don't really see people complaining about that we have a D&D core set coming up.
No, everybody's over the moon about that one.
Yeah, so and people have been asking for D&D and Magic crossovers for literal decades. I mean, like there were people asking for that when I first started getting really into it in 2008. I wasn't active online before then, but I've seen people talking about that forever. So it's more of a negotiating, like to what degree something can diverge from the fantasy aesthetic of Magic before they really don't like it, and that line is going to be different for different people.
Yeah, I think from what I saw, from what I gathered, and I can speak for myself, a lot of people were vocal about disliking it and yet still were buying it. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, I just find that interesting that people
Well,
like,
I don't want to talk too much about that aspect, but
right.
People feel compelled to. I will say I didn't buy one, but not because not because I hated it. I wasn't into it.
You didn't float your boat.
Yeah, and there was no commander deck I wanted to slot these into that I had to have, like the Lucille bat. I have a
It's a must-have.
Yeah, I have a equipment deck, but I could skip it. Like, it's okay.
Who's your favorite commander card? Like, who do you play usually?
My commander, well, I have Krenko. I've owned the primer for Krenko for years now. Besides Krenko,
Really?
my favorites are Duretti, Sahili. If you can't tell, I have a type here. I like artifacts. And then the last one is Zakama, the three-headed elder dinosaur.
The primal.
So those are like what I consider my core four. The other decks I can swap in and swap out main characters as I go, but those are the four that I really like, those commanders.
What would you say is going to be like the end game for the Legends book? I mean, there has to be more. There's so many different creatures to go into. Is there going to be plans for more of them, or is that again something you can't discuss?
I cannot discuss publicly just
Right.
yet if there's anything more coming. There are things. So, for instance, if I was developing like a pitch or something, I don't want to ruin anything or jinx anything.
Gotcha.
What I will say is, if it's the kind of thing you enjoy or you want to see more art books, please pick up this one because it'll get me back in order to write more in the future. And if it does well, they might let me go my own way a bit more. Make sure you let Wizards know what you want from these kinds of art books so that we can try and fill that gap in the future.
What's the quickest way for somebody to do that if they wanted to let Wizards know? What's the easiest route?
Well, besides just buying the book and having the sales look better,
Buy the book, everybody.
you can tweet at them. You can go through submit asks through like Tumblr and stuff. All that stuff is noticed, even if it feels like it's just shouting into a void, which it does feel like that sometimes. And I found really great ways to annoy Blake in particular about certain topics. But just tweet at them. Be polite. Don't be nasty about not having the particular book you like. But just say like, hey, I want to see more like this, but I'd like to see X. I'd like to see whatever covered.
And we do have you are scheduled for at least one more book, right? Correct? There's the multiverse book that you have that's going to be released in July, I think it is.
If you found that on a website, I can't comment on it. Just
Really?
we're
On
still
Amazon.
if you found it, no. What I'm saying is, if you found that elsewhere,
Oh,
you can share that information. But
I did. Well,
I'm not supposed to
oh,
be talking about anything just
well, oops.
yet.
I oh that. So yeah, I found it on. I found it on Amazon, but oh, that. I did not expect that answer. That threw me off for a bit, but okay. I mean, that works.
There is a listing for another book. Yes.
Yes. Interesting. Well, uh, I good luck with that. I no, but I guess finally would be what's some other things that you are working on as like as outside of Wizards of the Coast right now that you would like to talk about? Just anything like you want to plug or any sort of things that you would like to promote.
It's been slow going because of the pandemic, but I've been working on my own time on some DMs Guild content that I'm hoping to get out there soon for both Theros and Ravnica. I think the Theros one is likely to come out first. I don't have an actual end date on that because I've been pretty busy with other work in the short amount of work time I have available to me. I've been doing the stay-at-home dad thing for the last few months, so I only get like a day or two a week to be able to work on these freelance projects. So
That's it's definitely a challenge to be. I feel for all you parents out there who are sort of having to be the like not just the parent, but then sort of be the 24-hour guard, the teacher, the friend, the roles that ordinarily there might have been a couple hours of breaks in between for school and whatnot.
yeah, it's been interesting. Although I wouldn't trade the time with my son at all. It's just I don't
It's
have
a
a lot of
lot.
time for anything else right now. Yeah.
Well, that's about everything that I had for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you have if you guys out there want to read Jay's book, it is the Legends book, and it's great. I own a copy. I love it. It's got some great artwork in it, and I did a video about it, which you can check out. I'll put the link below. And thank you so much again for joining me.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Well, that was the interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would like to remind everybody that if you would like to be entered into the giveaway that we do for each video, you have to not just only subscribe, but comment on the videos. This is important because if your profile is set to private, I have no way of contacting you to announce whether or not you have won your award. And this week's winner goes to Oog. And Oog will be getting Squee Goblin Nabob. That's an interesting sentence, isn't it? Well, that is all for this week, and until next time, I got a scoop.